You can't afford to have one off session. So it's going to be one session after the other, repeating the same thing over and over again. So I think as far as Gale is concerned, he's definitely a lot more patient and watchful. We've seen him kind of make a minor adjustment in terms of getting his front foot outside off stump, trying to. And I've said this quite a few times, Rohit, even if he scores a 5 or a 10, he never looks out of form. No, when you're talking about Pujara is known as the rock. So when he bats, you feel that that solidity in his batting. You feel, the sense of security when he's batting. But you somehow in the last year or so, you didn't feel that way when he was batting, right? You could see shades of Virat Kohli 2018, the way he was batting on day 3. They're both the right areas, but maybe not the right areas for Joe Root. I mean, obviously he got a magnificent 100 in Australia. I mean, won the game. That was a match-winning 100. But again, with Ajinkya, the issue is he hasn't been getting those runs consistently enough. He, again, is averaging in last 2 years in his 20s. Because Jadeja, for me, I think the question with Jadeja is it's going to be Jadeja or Hanuma at number 6 or number 7. Because I think that's how I look at it. I mean, Ashwin and Jadeja both can play. Well, I still think India should win this series.
Cricket Life Stories with me, Neil Kagram. Today, again on the channel, we're joined by Deep Dasgupta. Deep, how's things going?
Oh, very good indeed. It's been a good series so far, very interesting, and obviously the summer's been pretty decent as well.
You're working on the BBC broadcast currently. So the topic of this discussion will focus on the subject of what it takes for an overseas side to win in England. We will be using the current England-India series as the main example of the chat, with the series at the time of this recording locked at 1-1 with 2 to play. So Deep, a general high-level question, what are the main challenges for an overseas team to play in England?
Well, obviously you've got to have the skill set, the right skill set that you need to counter the challenges that you face here, whether it's a bowler or a batter. Especially when you're looking from a batting perspective, then the moving ball, how to adjust and negate all that. So that's obviously the skill set, which is very, very important. Secondly, I think when you're traveling away from home, whether it's England coming over to India or India coming over to England, I think the most important part is being repetitive with the skill set as well. You can't afford to have one off session. So it's going to be one session after the other, repeating the same thing over and over again. So being consistent, being disciplined, I think these are things that are very, very important, especially when you're traveling away from home, because you're not used to it. So, for example, in England, the English players are used to playing in these conditions, so it comes naturally. But it's not the same when they travel to, let's say, India. Playing Spain or turning pitches, because it doesn't come naturally, they need to be very mindful of repeating the same thing over and over again and being disciplined about it.
If you compare conditions in England and India from a technical perspective, whether it be with the bat or ball, would you say they produce a different inherent style of cricketer?
Oh, absolutely. I won't say inherently different type of a cricketer, but I think to be successful in these two conditions, because the challenges are very different. You can actually say both of them, that as far as challenges are concerned, are two ends of a spectrum. I mean, in England, it's about seam bowling. Again, just looking at it from a batting perspective, it's about seam bowling. It's about pace. In India, it's about spin and heat. Here, it's cold. The spectrum, it's like two ends of the spectrum. So anyone who does well, obviously, is a really, really good cricketer, whether it's with the ball or with the bat. Look at Joe, look at someone like a Virat who's done well here before as well. So suddenly, when somebody does well in these two very different conditions, their status go up, their stature goes up, and obviously they looked at very differently.
So Sir Alistair Cook has been on record to say that the last few years of his career, opening the batting has been was the most challenging. So perhaps one of the main plus points for India so far has been the form of KL Rahul. What technical adjustments has he made since last appearing in the Test side, which has seen him get those two big scores in the first two Test matches?
Yeah, I think as far as KL is concerned, he's definitely a lot more patient and watchful. We've seen him kind of make a minor adjustment in terms of getting his front foot outside off stump, trying to kind of negate both the away swinger. And also, if he gets wrapped up on the pads, chances are the impact would be outside off stump. And also, I mean, because he's good off the legs. But I think what he's done is he's made that mental adjustment as well of making sure not to chase because his front foot is already outside the off stump, which would be roughly around the fourth stump. You've got to be very mindful that you leave everything outside because I mean, you're not going out chasing fifth or sixth stump delivery. So I think he's been really good at that, being making that technical as well as the mental adjustment. And yeah, and just being patient. I think just being patient because these conditions aren't the easiest, as Alice has mentioned. Uh, the fact that if you look at the openers in last 4 or 5 years, their numbers have gone down. You won't find too many openers getting big scores because it has become that much more challenging, especially for openers and batting per se in the last few years. So yeah, you've got to be very, very disciplined, and that's what Kale's been.
Obviously, before the first Test match, Shubman Gill had the position. Mayank Agarwal was set to come in with the injury, but he suffered the concussion. So KL's come in. So who would you say currently is the best fit to go out moving forward with Rohit?
I think Rohit and KL, I can't look beyond them at this point in time. I think what KL has done, even though the last Test match, the third one, hasn't been that great. But then, at this level as openers, you will have games like that. You will have games like that where you don't contribute a lot. But what he's done well is every time he's spent time out there, he's gone on to get a biggish score, whether it's 100 or a 70 or something, and that's important. I think in these conditions, once you're set, it becomes very important that you carry on. But just to get into that position is quite a task in itself.
And a word on Rohit Sharma, been out on the pool several times. One of his best shots in one-day cricket, but
yeah. I mean, listen, I think, and I've said this quite a few times, Rohit, even if he scores a 5 or a 10, he never looks out of form. He makes batting look so easy. It seems like he's got all the time in the world to bat. But yeah, he would be a little disappointed because again, he's done all the hard work. More often than not, he's been out there, been very, very patient, but he's got out to a few shots that he would be disappointed with. And most importantly, he's got out a few times coming extremely close to that 100. And he still hasn't got 100 away from home. I mean, as an opener and somebody who's achieved so much as Rohit, I'm sure these are the boxes that he would want to take and get that monkey off his back. But as far as him batting, I mean, he's looked comfortable. Obviously, he's very, very, comfortable having made those changes in Test match cricket, moving from white ball. It's just amazing to see him back like that. It's just that I hope in the next couple of Test matches he gets 100.
How are the Indian public viewing the situation around Pujara? The stats show a decline in runs over the last few years, but he has got tough runs in Australia, tough runs at Lords, and 91 at Headingley. How are the public viewing his situation at number 3?
See, I think he can be a polarizing. debate, so to say. I'm not saying him, but this debate that we're talking about of Pujara's current situation in the Indian team. And polarizing because some people, they talk about how well he's done in terms of the tough runs, as you were mentioning. But there's the other side of the story as well, where in the last 2, 3 years, he hasn't really got a lot of runs. So he's averaging in the 20s. As a number three batter of a top side in the world, that's not good enough. And especially for someone like Pujara, whose average, I think before the series, or rather before the turn of this year, was 50. He's now at 46, 47. So you expect more from someone like him. We're not talking about anyone else. We're talking about Cheteshwar Pujara here. So obviously the expectations are quite high. The second issue, I think, which I think was obviously a non-starter as far as I was concerned, was this whole strike rate debate. I think Pujara bats the way he did. Okay, for example, I mean, the last innings is a great example. I haven't seen Pujara as fluent as he was in that last innings, the 91 that he got. But even then, his strike rate was 50. So at his best, when he was scoring those hundreds in Australia a few years ago, look at his strike rate. He was still going at 55. It wasn't, I mean, that's how he bats. But I think what was a bit of a concern was the way he was batting. It wasn't the strike rate per se. Obviously, the scores that he wasn't getting the big ones, but also he wasn't looking confident enough. When you're talking about Pujara is known as the rock. So when he bats, you feel that solidity in his batting. You feel, the sense of security when he's batting. But you somehow in the last year or so, you didn't feel that way when he was batting, right? And obviously he did not get as many big scores that, a number three or someone like Pujara you expect of him. But I think that 91 that he scored, I think should be, I hope he's turned a leaf there, in terms of the way he's been approaching. Last 2, 3 years, I haven't really seen him play the back foot punch, the pull, the square cut, or those cover drives as often as he did in that inning. So I just hope he's found a newer version of himself. I hope he's reinvented himself that last innings and hope to see more of Cheteshwar Pujara the way he batted in the last innings.
For his style of batsmanship, would you say that English conditions, going back to the debate, are the most difficult for him? So around the world, once if he comes in and sees off the new ball, he can become slightly more expansive once the potency of the new ball has gone. But in England, it does a lot throughout the day, through the innings. Would that be, again, a fair statement?
I think that's a fair statement for every batter, to be honest. I mean, you never set here in England, especially in these conditions with that Duke's ball, which keeps moving, even if it's 60 overs old, it'll just keep moving around. So I think that's just fair for every batter, to be honest. But with Pujara, the thing is, if you're looking at from a slightly different angle, what happens is, and again, I think you kind of mentioned it as well. For some other batsmen who've played 40 deliveries, then they start shifting through gears, right? They start moving on and they start, that's how you pace a test innings, because you know that there'll be spells where the bowler is going to be on the top and you've got to play through that spell and then, make sure that you just get over that hurdle. And then obviously you will get these spells where you're getting quick boundaries. Suddenly your cover drives or your flicks are going in the gaps and you're picking boundaries. Suddenly you see a bowler that you feel a little more comfortable. Maybe the sun is out, the ball's not swinging as much, it's not moving around. So you need to pace your innings. You've got to be very, very aware of situations, especially here in England, as you were talking about. And I think that's what Pujara did in the last innings, and that's the reason I'm saying he needs to figure that out. And I hope he's reinvented himself. He doesn't play that same gear right through his innings. Maybe he needs to move up and down, and that's what he used to do. 2000 till 2016, 17, he did exactly that. It's just that in the last 2, 3 years, for whatever reasons, he's been in this bubble, which I hope he's come out of.
And then when you focus on the English, they've changed their top three from the first couple of test matches. From what you've seen, do you think the top three of Burns, Hameed, and Malan have what it takes to score heavily in the remainder of this series and then beyond?
This batting order definitely looks much better, and the reason being, and I've said this on BBC as well, now that they've scored runs, the fact that Hameed's coming off really good season, right? And he's your genuine opener. Then Dawid Malan, yes, the last time I think he played red ball cricket has been a while, but he's played a lot of white ball cricket since, and he's scored a lot of runs in white ball cricket. So what after that second test at Lords, what you could see was, there weren't enough runs there, respective what format, enough experience of winning. So what, especially someone like a Dawid Malan or a Moeen Ali brings in to that side is that sense of winning games. Obviously scoring runs, again, maybe in a different format, but there's a different confidence when you have scored runs behind you. So I think, and obviously as players also, I think someone like a Dawid Malan or a Hameed, Haseeb looks really, really good. And even Moeen for that matter. I mean, Joe Root obviously can't stop scoring runs. that obviously does not help the Indian cause. But it just looks like a really, really good batting side, a lot more balanced, that's it.
You mentioned balance. A lot of debate that you hear on the TV, they look a lot more traditional in their stance, in their setup.
Yes.
What are your views on that? Is it all about scoring runs? Is it about technical side of things? How do you add to the debate?
Okay, I'd say it's obviously about scoring runs, right? Technique helps you. It's a tool which helps you score runs, and the better it is, the more consistent you will be. So now some of the more unorthodox techniques that we've seen already does not mean that a batter will not score runs. It's just that at times, chances are he might not be as consistent as some of the others, right? So for all I care, you can hold the bat upside down and still score runs. End of the day, it's all about that. It's all about scoring runs. I mean, it's not about how good you look, how orthodox you look, but technique, a better technique would help you be more consistent, and obviously you'll score more runs.
Now, if we focus on the two number fours and both skippers next, Virat Kohli and Joe Root, from a captaincy perspective, how would you assess their performances in terms of their decision-making so far in the series? And is there any main point of difference captaining in England in comparison to around the world?
Yes. Excuse me. To answer your second question first, it is definitely more different because of the conditions. You got to be very, very careful about the conditions, mindful about the overcast in England. One of the things that you do is you look at the pitch, but you look at the sky as well. So those things are kind of unique to England and captaining or even playing in England. So yes, it's that way. Kind of you have to approach it a little differently. Your captaincy, your decision making. Both the captains, I think, they've had decent. I was a little surprised to see Joe Root with the short pitch thing at Lords the last day, 5th day morning. I think they got a little carried away and maybe emotionally attached to, whatever had happened before that. But apart from that, yeah, it's been. I mean, from a captaincy perspective, it's been a good series so far. Yeah.
And then Kohli with the bat. There's a lot of attention on obviously the Indian skipper. He's got a 40 in the series. He's got a 50 in his last outing. But from the outsider looking in, you get the sense he's very eager to get bat on ball. See the Sky team, they did a technical analysis on him as well. Do you think technically things are slightly out of sync in comparison to his extremely high standards? Is it a mental thing? Or is it none of the above and all credit to the English bowlers?
No, credit to the English bowlers. I mean, that definitely is there. There's absolutely no two ways about it. And the English bowlers have been really good. I mean, right through the series, to be honest, and stuck to their plans. As far as Virat is concerned, I mean, listen, this is an egg and a chicken kind of thing. But more often than not, in my experience and in my judgment or opinion, it's the mind which leads the body. And I'd rather go with the eagerness than the technical stuff. Okay, for example, last innings, he got that 50. Forget the second day, as in the fourth day. When he was batting on day three, I think technically he was still batting the same way, right? But he was a lot more patient outside the off stump. You could see shades of Virat Kohli 2018, the way he was batting on day three. He was letting go beautifully, beautifully. Uh, yeah, so I think it's that eagerness because obviously what happened, we got to understand 2018, first test match he got runs, he got 100 the first innings he played, right? After a really bad series that he had. 2018, very first test innings, gets 100. He was dropped on 30, and it was Jennings who dropped him or whoever off Anderson, but he goes on to get 100. And that's a different story then. I mean, if you get your 100 in the very first innings of a series, you're in a different mind space. And then he found the right tempo, uh, maybe the right mindset to bat in that innings. Now, let's talk about this series. First innings, first ball duck, chasing outside off stump. He hasn't scored a lot of runs compared to his high standards. He hasn't really scored that many runs. I think last 2 years he's also averaging in the 20s. So there is a lot of could be again. I can't say that this is the case, but it seems to me uh, maybe a little more anxious to get runs, get anxious to get bat on ball, get to that quick 20, 25, and then settling down. Uh, it is a possibility because his last innings in the last test match just tells me that it's more mind than technique.
And word on Joe Root on current form. Is he currently the best batsman in the world?
Currently, yeah, I mean, come on, nobody is scoring more runs than him. So obviously, yes, he's currently the best batsman as we speak. Yeah, and listen, he's solidified. See, there was this bit of a chatter 6 months ago about whether he's still part of the Fab Four or not, um, or is he still competing with them? But I think in the last 6 months, he's kind of not just solidified his place in Fab Four, but like you said, I mean, he's right up there, And what has been very interesting is the last 6 months he's been scoring. Last 8 months he's been scoring all around the world, different conditions. Sri Lanka was different, or double hundred in India, that was totally different. Runs here in England are absolutely different, and they are quality bowling sides. I mean, India, double hundred, even Sri Lanka in Sri Lanka, and India in England. That's one of the best bowling attacks you can find in the world, seam bowling attack. So, yeah, I mean, just keeping in mind the quality of runs as well, not just the quantum, which is huge. Yeah, it's right up there.
Have the Indian bowlers bowled a tad too short, allowing him to play a lot off the back foot and almost not
Mm.
exploiting those pitch up English conditions enough?
Uh, okay, I know where you're coming from, and let me rephrase this. They're both the right areas, but maybe not the right areas for Joe Root. Okay, everyone has a different good length. Generally speaking, 9 out of 10 batters would play off the front foot, the length that Indian bowlers been bowling to Joe Root. They've been bowling good length, right? There's nothing wrong with the length as such. But what makes Joe Root very special is that he plays off the back foot, which 9 out of 10 would play off the front foot, right? So that would mean he's playing it late, he's allowing the ball to swing. So there are two ways to play the swinging ball. Either you negate it getting to the pitch of the ball, so you don't allow the ball to swing, or you give it time and allow the ball to swing as much as it can, and then decide whether you want to play or not. So right, either play early or play late. Now, he's one of those guys who wants to play it late, and it's been very, very successful for him. And that's where the length for Joe Root can be a tad bit fuller, the good length that I'm talking about. Yes, there is a danger of being driven for boundaries, but if you look at the way he scored his runs, he's maybe would have scored 2% of the runs down the wicket, as in down the ground, mid off, mid on. So it's not that, I mean, and if you look back at his 100 in the first inning of England only played one innings in the last Test match. If you look at that 100, every time he tried to drive, he was losing his shape off the front foot, I'm saying, right? He was opening up, he was slicing it. So it's something that Indian bowlers need to try more, make him drive off the front foot and make him play more right of covers between mid-on and covers in that area. And see, I mean, the kind of form that he's in, for all you know, he'll still be great. But that's something I think Indian bowlers haven't done enough of. Maybe that's something they might try.
And then a word on Ajinkya Rahane's form at number 5. Again, what are the voices coming out of India about him?
Yeah, I mean, obviously he got that magnificent 100 in Australia. I mean, won the game. That was a match-winning 100. But again, with Ajinkya, the issue is he hasn't been getting those runs consistently enough. He, again, is averaging in last 2 years in his 20s. I mean, Pujara, Virat, Ajinkya, your number 3, 4, 5, all three of them are averaging in your 20s, and that's not a good sign. He's also the vice captain. He was looking good again in the second innings last Test match, but then, yeah, I mean, he needs to get more runs. As simple as that. I mean, he's got his own technique, which is a little unorthodox, if I may call it, but it has worked for him in the past. And he's the best part about these three are they've scored enough runs. They've got all the experience in the world of scoring runs. So it's just that finding the right momentum, right frame of mind, the tempo, and just trying to block out. Because what happens is when you come across a phase like this, there's a lot of negativity around you. There are a lot of negative thoughts which come to your head, and one of the biggest challenges is to actually, kind of isolate yourself from all that. But again, like the good part is for someone like even Virat or Pujara or an Ajinkya, people who've played 50, 60, 70 test matches, you don't play 70 test matches. You haven't been through the ups and downs. So they've been through this phase before and they've been able to come out of it before as well. So hope they will do that.
And then next up, the keepers. Keeper yourself, you're probably one of the best people to ask about this. In England, how different is it from around the world? With the ball moving past the bat, from a technical perspective, how would you stand and line up differently in England? And also, would you catch differently? Would your hand position be differently? Talk us through it.
The only thing I'll do differently, or I've done every time I've played here in England, is not move as much because the ball keeps moving, keeps wobbling even after it's past the batsman. So if as a keeper you're moving and the ball's moving as well, then you tend to put yourself up, get into really weird positions, and so because the ball wobbles around so much, the idea is to stay as still as possible and just follow the ball. So get into a good position, right, as early as possible, and then just follow it with your hands. Don't move too much. And that's the difference basically, because the tricky part in England is obviously it swings around, but at times it does not carry as much as, let's say, Australia or South Africa. So while there is movement and all this wobble and all, you also can't be going further back because the carry isn't that great. So that makes it a little more trickier because you're closer to the stump, so your reaction time is less. So that also makes you kind of, I mean, that's what I'd say to any keeper, and that's what I'd follow as well, is not to move. Just get into a position, stand still for as long as possible.
How would you say both keepers, Jos Buttler and Rishabh Pant, have done so far
As keepers, I
behind the
think both of them
stumps
have well.
as keepers?
Yeah. As keepers, both of them have done well. I think. Yeah, every now and then they've fumbled a few, but that you expect. When the ball wobbles so much. Uh, yeah, I think keeping wise, both of them have been really good.
And focus on the English keeping situation. Do you think England have picked their best keeper batsman out there in Jos Buttler? See, for the fourth Test match coming up, Buttler will be absent due to the birth of his second child. So
Mm,
Jonny Bairstow will
mm.
take the gloves. Do you think Bairstow would
Yeah,
be a better bet moving forward? Do you think, what are your views on Ben Foakes? A lot of people regard him as the best
yeah.
batsman in England. Do you think England should find a spot with him moving forward? What are your thoughts on the
I
England situation?
I honestly think because there is also a big question mark on Jos Buttler being available for the Ashes or not. If that's the case, I think it's about time to start looking in front as well because, as you mentioned, they're quality wicket keepers. Ben Foakes is one of the best in the world, obviously the best in England for sure, but one of the best in the world as well. And he hasn't played a home test match as yet. So, and and with the bat, he's been pretty good with the bat in first class cricket. So he can bat in these conditions. So without a shadow of doubt, I think Ben Foakes is definitely a good choice. With Best, obviously, see, he's been getting those 20s and 30s. I mean, if you look at his last quite a few test matches, test innings, he's looked good for his 20s, 30s. He looks very comfortable, but he hasn't really capitalized on those starts. So I don't know how Bairstow stands in the scheme of things, but Ben Foakes is someone that I definitely be looking at.
And then Rishabh Pant with the bat. Is he trying to be a bit too aggressive currently? And in English conditions, do
Mm.
you think batting one position, is he batting one position too high at number six?
No, I don't think so. I think he's good enough to bat at five as well. But sorry, but what I think is he needs to be a little more clear in terms of his stroke play. Uh, I mean, some of the shots or the way that he's got out is playing in between shots, not really defending or not really being aggressive. So, needs to be a little more clear in his thought process. Only three things can happen: either you leave, you defend, or you play a shot. So nothing in between. Because what happens is if you're getting out doing one of those three, then you can look at the execution part of it. Then you can say, you know what, okay, the execution wasn't right, whether it was defense or whatever. But when you're getting out playing in between shots, then it's not the execution part. It's the whole process. Then it's whether you picking the right delivery, whether you there's clarity of thought or not. So suddenly, because he's getting out in a certain way, you don't know whether it's a mental thing or it's an execution thing, right? So I think that's where he needs to sort out being first mentally be very clear in shot making. And then listen, the kind of player that he is, he will play his shots, and I think we should encourage, not discourage him playing his natural game because that's the kind of player he is. Uh, and the only thing you would want of him is to be a little more careful with the ball selection and little more clarity in what he wants to do. Not getting out playing those half-hearted drives or cards. Either you go for it or you don't go for it.
Then in English conditions, should every team around the world pick their best spinner? And if the answer is yes, why isn't Ravi Ashwin played?
Because I don't think the question is either Ashwin or Jadeja. I don't think that's the question as far as I'm concerned. I think that uh, the question is more strategical or tactical in terms of are you going to go in with three seamers or three or four seamers? Because Jadeja, for me, I think the question with Jadeja is it's going to be Jadeja or Hanuma at number six or number seven. Because I think that's how I look at it. I mean, Ashwin and Jadeja can both can play. Not just as two spinners, but Jadeja a batsman who can bowl and Ashwin a bowler who can bat. Six, I mean 7 and 8. I don't think the question again is whether one spinner or two spinner or the best spinner. I mean, Ashwin definitely is the best spinner. I don't think I don't have a doubt in my mind about that, especially in these conditions. Um, yeah, so for me, I think Jadeja and Ashwin both can play and should play.
For a seam and swing attack in England, I know we touched on it a bit earlier when we talked about the Joe Root, but what lengths should they be bowling consistently to succeed?
Length up. See, the length is top of off stump across the world wherever you go. Obviously, that top of off stump length differs, conditions and everything else. That differs. So England would be, yeah. I mean, you rather have the interesting part in England is you've got to figure out when the ball's swinging. So at times, I mean, and people who have an experience playing here or witnessing cricket here, it'll be a little tough for them to actually realize that when the sun's out, the ball actually at times stops swinging, and when suddenly it's cloudy, it's swinging a lot more, and this can happen over 5 minutes. It can. I mean, things can change that rapidly. So you got to be very, very mindful in terms of whether the ball's swinging or not. Obviously, if it's swinging, the length is a little further up. If it's not, then and I think one of the best exponents of that is Jimmy Anderson. His line and length changes when the ball's not swinging. He goes further back. He goes straighter. Uh, and you could see that when the batsman's on top, obviously it goes a little wide. So I mean, it's an absolute treat to watch him. Uh, and like I said, what the conditions are looking at the line length that Jimmy Anderson is bowling.
You mentioned Anderson. A word on Ollie Robinson as well, new into the Test side. How have you viewed his success so far in the first 3 Tests?
I saw him bowl against New Zealand as well. I think he's brilliant. I think he's got the skill sets to be successful all over the world, because he's someone who, and obviously mentioned that he picked a wobble seam in 1 week's time. I mean, somebody who can pick that up as early as that. I mean, obviously he's got things up there as well. So once that, secondly, if you look at the fact that he can seam the ball around, he can swing it, he's got that extra bounce. So and when I juxtapose all that on different conditions around the world, that extra bounce would help, and the seam movement would help in Australia. The swing, obviously, in conditions here in England, New Zealand, and South Africa, seaming conditions in these conditions, swinging. So yeah, and he's got the pace, he's got the bounce that can bother on some continental pitches as well. Now, whether the big question is fitness levels, and because obviously someone who will play a lot of cricket from going forward. So the fitness levels, because obviously things are, I mean, when you start playing regularly at this level, things start to get a lot more tougher.
And then, do you think when you're picking a seam swing attack, there has to be an element of variety in that attack too? And how would you say the Indian quicks have adapted to conditions in this series? And what, in your opinion, is the best combination to go with moving forward?
I think combination-wise, as far as England's concerned, I think what they would be looking at going forward is more of rotation and workload management with someone like Anderson and also Robinson. Then Mark Wood is available for the next Test match, and yeah, I mean Shakib's there. So yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be more on the lines of player management. India again, I think one of the things would be management and workload and all that. But I think India should go in with a 3-1 rather than a 4 seam. I think maybe Ashwin, and especially the 4th Test, as what the next Test is obviously at Oval, where spinners have traditionally benefited. It's been on the slower side, that pitch. At the Oval. So yeah, why not 3-1? Obviously Jadeja is there, so it becomes 3-2 rather than 4-1. So I won't mind looking at 3-2 at all.
And who would the 3 be? Jasprit, Siraj?
Siraj and Jasprit Siraj and Shami. Yeah.
Shami, yeah. And then it's a fascinating subject, fascinating series so far. So just to end on this chat, how difficult is it for an overseas team to win in England, and how would victory rank for the Indians if they were to pull it off?
Well, I still think India should win this series. And obviously it's going to be huge. It's going to be massive because it'll be back-to-back two away series. So, this Indian team would have achieved, which not too many teams in the world have done, beating Australia in Australia and then England in England. So that's obviously going to be huge from that perspective. It's important for them to bounce back, and India has in the past bounced back from defeats like these. So they know how to do it. And one of the things they are really good at channelizing is disappointment and hurt, which a couple of things they would be. So I think they will come really, really hard. And like I said, I still think India should go on to win the series.
Perfect. Thank you very much again for your time. Really appreciate it. And all the best for the weeks ahead. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Pleasure as always.
So Neil Kagram, Cricket Love Stories, Deep Dasgupta. Thank you.